60 degrees, seriously, in January? That means plein air. Fellow minders, I'm getting ready for a plein air trip, kind of spur of the moment. I mean, 3 or 4 days ago we had temperatures in the teens, snow and ice on the ground, and today it's 60 degrees. That's South Carolina. Actually, I'm not complaining. I really love it. So I'm headed up to western part of South Carolina, or I should say further west, to a place called Jones Gap. A beautiful mountain stream pass that comes down through the Saluda Mountains. Saluda Mountains are sort of our western mountain range that start the foothills to the Smokies. Just beautiful up there. I'm not going to miss an opportunity for plein air on a 60-degree January. The only problem is it's a little bit of a gray day, so we'll see. Well, as you can see, I barely got a start on it. One of the mistakes I make all the time is never giving myself enough time. That and basically delving into detail, too much detail. I'm still a fairly inexperienced plein air painter, so I often frustrate myself by not giving myself enough time. I was there maybe an hour and a half, and I always imagine myself doing a bunch of little thumbnails and renderings, and I came away with one that was barely started. But it's still, I think, very valuable. It's a beautiful place, and the impression of what I was looking at for an hour is still there. So when I get back, I'll finish it up by adding all the deep contrast and values, and we should be good. We'll see you back at the studio. Okay, so here's what I've got coming back, and I've already started just kind of deepening the shadows in some of the rocks. That's a pretty simple little sketch. I just didn't get very far. Honestly, I was kind of uncomfortable there. I was looking for a place to put my seat down, and then I realized that one of my tripod attachments was missing. I left it at home. So I had trouble finding a way to put the camera, so I didn't get a lot of shots. And I was kind of leaning my butt up against a rock. And then having to hold, my sketchbook, I couldn't hold it on my lap, so I was having to keep my arm under it and, attach you saw how I had the palette attached to the book. Pretty uncomfortable, and I just didn't give myself enough time. So there's not a whole lot here, but I'm going to turn it into what kind of a sketch that I can. and it's just a beautiful place. So I still had a lot of fun. I just have a lot of contrast to add. It's just too flat. I wanted to fill in the basic shapes, and I think what I'm going to do is just kind of put a little hand drawn border. This is, after all, a watercolor journal. Right now I've got this sort of gray-brown Faber-Castell watercolor pencil, and I just thought I would use that and go through and define where some of my edges were. As I mentioned earlier, it was still beneficial being out there, because what you see just kind of indelibly, well, not indelibly, but it just sort of burns into your brain, and it's pretty much nearly as good as painting the whole thing on location. But I'm home now. I'm comfortable. Rather than treat it roughly, I guess, since I'm home, I'm going to try to keep it fairly tight. I'll probably leave some of the edges loose, but it's not an ink and wash. It's a regular painting. So that's just one of my favorite spots near home to go and be with nature. It's just beautiful out there. This is a great use for watercolor pencils, by the way. Once you have like a loose set of values or shapes down, you can go through and kind of delineate where some of it is. And I'll go back, with a brush and soften some of that so it doesn't look too outliney, since I'm not going for a pen and wash look. So rocks and rock studies are always fun to do because they're great little exercises in value contrast. So I'm just trying to get in some distant kind of impression of background trees. At this point, I'm doing it from memory. I thought about pulling up a screen cap from some of my videos. I didn't take a picture, but no, I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. This is a Rosemary and Company travel flat, 1/4 inch flat travel brush. I'm just continuing to use my travel setup. Even though I'm not on location, it's always good to stay familiar with your tools. And this is actually the first time I've used this brush. I ordered it a while ago and I haven't had an opportunity to use it, so. I think the important thing when you go on location with little sketches like this, it's just come away with a good drawing. A good drawing and a good impression. You can always fill in the paint later, and if you really only feel comfortable just drawing, and turns out with the time I had, that probably would have been a better idea, is just to get a nice detailed drawing. But I was rushing to try to finish something. I didn't really need to, but you know how it goes. Sometimes you just kind of think you want to do it a certain way. But here I've got a light washes in my paint, and that watercolor pencil that I put down, I'm adding paint, but it's also kind of blending with those pencil lines. And see, it just makes a nice, neat kind of shape, if you're going for that. Obviously, I'm not going for a super loose sketch here, but that's a pretty cool technique that you can use with watercolor pencil. In fact, I usually don't use watercolor pencils much except for neutrals. I like anywhere from, I use greens, I use browns some, and I use, like, this is kind of a brown gray. The thing is if you want to mix it with your paint, you want to make sure it does blend. One problem is that you would choose something that's like too warm or too cold, and then when you activate it, watercolor pencil becomes more vibrant. When you activate it, all of a sudden it stands out and you can see. So you kind of want to be careful with how much you want it to blend. So that's the one tip I would give you on that. But you could actually take these into the field with you and do some sketching and light wash work with it. If you've not seen any of my watercolor pencil videos, I haven't done a lot. I want to do some more. In fact, I have a new set of watercolor pencils I've never used. I plan to do a review of them and never got around to it, My philosophy on watercolor pencils, and it's just me, this is just a preference, it's not a rule, is I consider watercolor pencils a drawing medium, not a painting medium. Some people like to put down all these shading and then go in and use that as paint. I don't. I prefer to draw with watercolor pencil and let the drawing show through as a drawing. You can see it's turning kind of green because I have this green paint in my brush. So I'm actually activating that watercolor pencil with paint, a colored wash. It's one of the many things you can do, Anyway, back to what I was saying. This is an exception where I actually kind of paint, that's with watercolor pencil, and that's using it along with a painting. I really think that's where watercolor pencil shines. It's just to draw your whole picture, shade your whole picture with watercolor pencil, and then activate it as paint. To me, my preference is just really very tedious. I thought, why do that? When I can fill in all these areas, but I can go back and detail, or make some fine delineations as to where some edges are. Great use of a watercolor pencil. Let's see, I'm activating it here along these edges. And I still have some colored wash in my brush. So I'll do a little dry brush shading here. And I just can go back and forth like that. I'd much rather use watercolor pencil that way than as a primary painting medium. And I know all the tricks about, you can flick paint off on your brush off the end of it. And I don't see the point of that. I can do the same thing with a watercolor palette. But since watercolor pencil's strength is as a drawing instrument, then that's the way I use them. I'm almost done with this. It's deepening the deep woods contrast back there a little bit. I'm using a kind of a red purplish wash. It was a kind of a blue gray, purple gray cast of the deep woods. Now I don't necessarily have to keep it that color, but I did want to tone down the green a little bit that I'd used. And this is a good way, I think, to add some striking contrast back there. Let those distant woods kind of recede. it's really fun adding color, popping the color up from the location, because it was a very gray day, as you saw in the video. But you know, you just have to kind of look for those colors and then decide, you know, are you going to enhance those? And most of the rocks were kind of a greenish hue with some of the moss growing over them. And, you know, there was some brown leaves on the ground. Like I say, the distant trees had sort of a purplish hue. But there are some evergreens mixed in, so I just want a nice little journal painting of that. And I think for the video's sake, I've got to stop right there. I'll probably keep picking at it and looking at it, but that's certainly better than where I left it in the field. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I sure had fun painting it for you, and get out on location if you can. I know it's kind of cold weather, but you know, if the weather breaks and gives you an opportunity, hey, go for it. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. If that was a help and you enjoyed that, hope you'll give me a thumbs up and subscribe. And thanks again, patrons, for your support. That is so very, very important to what I'm doing right now. And we'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.